Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cup Duet Reviews, brought to you by Cup of Hemlock Theatre. I am your host and co-artistic producer, Mackenzie, and I am joined once again by my fabulous and also dressed in flannel today, the wonderful Ryan Borochovitz, my co-artistic producer. Hello, Ryan.
Hello, Mac. I see we both got the memo.
Both got the memo.
Wear some kind of plaid in
Yes.
honor of this show. Not that
Yes.
all of the costumes themselves were in plaid, but there's something just
There's definitely
plaid
something like
vibes.
small town Canadian plaid.
Yeah,
about this
Dust
show.
Bowl chic, as I often
Yes.
describe this particular
Yes.
shirt I'm wearing.
Yes. Dust Bowl chic. That's a good way to put it. So today, if you can't tell by my background,
Unless
we
you
are
are
just
listening to this as audio only and can't see the background.
true. So in that case, we are discussing Bone Cage, not the Bone Cage, not the Bone Collector, as I mistakenly called it all this past week when I was telling people what I was going to see. No, it is called Bone Cage, and it was written by Catherine Banks, and it's presented by 141 Collective in association with Assembly Theatre, and it's running till May the 20th, and it was directed by Cass Van Wyck, who we talked about last time we were at Assembly Theatre doing the Huns.
And before
played-
that, in 2 Minutes to Midnight, which you
Yes.
weren't on that review.
I was
but
not
yeah.
on that panel.
Yes, we've seen her grace the stage at Assembly many times. She
Yes.
also runs the venue, and I believe is artistic director of 141
Yes, and
Collective.
this is her directorial debut
Mhm.
in this particular play. Last time we talked about her, she was the wolf in sheep's clothing in The Office. That's such a good play, The Huns. Loved
really
it,
was.
Loved it. But yes, so we're talking about the Bone Cage this time. And so, Ryan, can you summarize for us what this play is about?
But before I do, what's in your cup?
Oh my goodness, Ryan. Oh, we are on number 3 of these reviews. It's just become one of these things.
Just for this
All right.
week, this is like review 100 and
Yeah.
something.
Yes, that's true. That's true. All right, either way, in my cup I have some more Diet Cranberry juice, because that's pretty what is in my fridge at the moment. Ryan?
Yeah, so we're recording this kind of early the next morning
are.
after we saw the show, so I have coffee in my The Cup Cup. Hey, that's the show we're watching right now.
Yes, it is. All right. Now, Ryan, as you do so well, give us the summary of this play.
Yeah, this is a bit of a tough play to summarize. I will say right off the bat that this is an established play. I actually meant to look up what year it's from. I don't know if you happen to have that information handy or want to go mad Googling for it. But this isn't like a new work. I think we tend to associate venues like Assembly Theatre as an indie incubator for new or emerging playwrights to cut their teeth or get new works into the bloodstream. But this is an established play that's already been performed. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong.
Won a Governor General's Award.
Yeah, it did win a Governor General's Award. So it's kind of interesting new experiment, I guess, for just getting back into this work and really diving into this older text. Did you find the year yet?
No, but I did find it was a film in 2020.
Oh, there you go. Oh, that's pretty recent.
Yeah. You gotta watch that.
You can't find the year anywhere? I'm just curious because there's like a lot of time-specific references in the text.
Sorry. It was published in 2008.
2008. Okay, and that was probably performed a couple years before that, as is usually the time cycle here.
Yes.
So it's set in a small, unspecified town in, I believe, Nova Scotia.
It is Nova Scotia. I thought it was BC, but no, it's Nova Scotia.
No, they mentioned going to BC, kind of go west, young man type manifest destiny mentality, but no, we are in the Maritimes, and we follow a small cast of characters in this small town. They work in the forestry industry for the most part. That seems to dominate the economy of the town. And there's this kind of trouble looming in the background of the story about how eventually the forest will be depleted and everybody in the town will likely be completely out of work. But don't think about that now. Just drink and kind of deal with all your problems. So it's kind of, without getting into the foibles of each and every character, it's sort of tough to describe the actual main plot. We sort of center around this one family. We have half siblings. We have Jamie and Chicky are the two sort of central characters in this.
Yes.
And Jamie is getting married to his high school sweetheart, I guess we'll call her, Krista. She's still in high school. He has since dropped out, and Chicky is kind of just trying to figure out her own life amidst all of this. We also have Kevin, who is Krista's brother, and we have another family whose two siblings are Robbie and Lissa, and we have the father of... The family dynamics are actually difficult to even try to untangle here, as I'm realizing.
There's a lot of Shakespearean levels of sleeping with people.
Well, yeah, like a lot of incest and half siblings and half parents, and like,
are you my half sibling? Are we not?
Yes, some of that is spoilers, so we won't get into the details about who and who, but we also have just the, let's call him father figure, Clarence, who is the patriarch of this household, but is very much, in a spiral of himself. He's reeling from the death of a younger son named Travis, who had brain cancer, and is, in his grief, thinking up questionable, often silly ways of trying to bring his lost son back. And so...
Clarence.
So a lot of the plot centers just around the going-ons of this town, the various dynamics between the characters. There's a lot of people in this town who we don't see on stage who get mentioned and are embroiled in the lives of these characters. People like Reg, who is this older married man with whom Chicky has been having an affair. Yeah, Merv the Perv, as he is referred to. Also, just heavy content warnings for a lot of the stuff. I don't know how much we're going to get into the details, but yeah, you might want to, if you have specific triggers, like there is a content warning in advance of the show before they get into it, and they do allow people to step out if they need to. But if you know of specific triggers you have, I encourage you to maybe contact Assembly Theater before going or before booking your ticket, and feel free to inquire, if there are specific things that you are sensitive to, because there's a lot in this show.
Yeah, even I was feeling very uncomfortable with some of the language they were using. We'll get more into it, because I think that helped where I was feeling that maybe we're crossing some lines here. So some spots where it's very hard to make anybody connectable. I don't know. We'll get into that.
Yeah. So I guess just to try to wrap up this very strange summary, again, very difficult play to summarize, but I would say that a lot of the main plot lines does center around the impending wedding of Jamie and Krista, which is at the beginning of the play. They're like a week out from when it's about to be, and a lot can happen in a week, let's just say, and that this play is sort of documenting a snapshot of these characters' lives as they are coming up to this, what feels like a very monumental milestone in their life, but I think we're supposed to interpret a lot of what happens as just a typical week for them, which is interesting. And it's a lot about, cycles of poverty, about alcoholism, family trauma, and just the kind of horrible, small-minded ways that happen if you get stuck in these cycles and are unable to maybe leave a town like this, as many of the characters try, and it's questionable whether or not they are even capable of being successful at that. How's that for a summary?
Very good summary, Ryan. Very good summary.
I don't know, but it's what we got here. So before we get into our spoiler zone, do you have general appraisals? What do you think of this show? You want to?
Yeah,
comment?
Sure. General appraisals. Okay.
Non-spoiler,
general appraisals. This play definitely feels in kind of like a Canadian version of like August Osage County, which I think also came out around 2008, if I'm not mistaken. Like early to mid 2000s, somewhere.
Yeah, sure, around then.
The play premiered also in 2008 and was the recipient of a Pulitzer Prize. So anyway, so back to this. So this play definitely feels in line with kind of the 2008 family drama era we were in at that point. And so this definitely walks a line with the characters being almost too unlikable to actually connect with the piece. But overall, though, I think the cast did a very good job. I mean, once again, you always see the great post about Harry Potter, right? Where you have the actress who plays Umbridge, Imelda Staunton, Jason Isaacs, who plays Lucius Malfoy, Ralph Fiennes, who plays Voldemort, and Helena Bonham Carter playing Bellatrix. And it's the whole phrase is, if you hated these characters, these actors did a good job. Don't put hate on them for their performance. And I definitely think this is somewhere in line with that, because there definitely are some very unlikable characters in this play, but I give the actors full credit because I don't know them personally, but I hope they are not anything like their characters and what their characters believe. But definitely, I give kudos to anybody who can go into a space and embrace some of the very dark and dirty aspects of what these characters are. So I give full credit to that. Definitely, the drama kept me very interested. As Ryan knows, I was trying to predict the ending of the play. I was looking for the Chekhov gun, as it were.
We
I
will
did not
talk
get it
about the
right.
ending post spoiler, but
Yes,
yes, keep that
yes,
in mind.
yes, 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 yes. Post spoiler. We will talk about the ending. But yes, I was actively intrigued. There were moments I actually was leaning forward in my seat to get more into the story. I definitely say the cast had very good chemistry with each other. You definitely could feel as if they were all part of the small towny vibes of all kind of knowing each other. Definitely felt some stuff there. But yeah, overall, I definitely had a very good night out at the theater. It definitely was a play that's heavy, so I think people just have to be aware of that going in, because if you're not in the headspace to sit through something really heavy like this, it may throw you the wrong way. So I definitely just think be mindful of your mental health before you go in, just because this play definitely gets into some stuff that could definitely be triggering or upsetting, or just leave you in a bit of a funk afterwards that maybe you don't want to stew in too much. So that's what I'll say for now until the spoiler beer can shows up. Ryan?
Yeah, like I would say, you brought up August Osage County. I think maybe a more apt comparison is even Judith Thompson's plays. And I don't know if that's just the Canadian element,
Maybe.
puts more of that coloring on it, but that, yes, if you want like frames of reference for what you might be getting into, because I don't feel like our plot description did a good job of that. Yeah, it's got very Judith Thompson energy. Another play that I would maybe compare it to is Heroes of the Fourth Turning, which has gotten a lot of buzz lately and is going to be put on by Crows and Helen Company next year. Woo. So I think there's a lot of fruitful comparisons that could be drawn to that. But yeah, I think that it's a very good production of what this play is. I'm not sure if I love this play, if I'm being completely honest, and we can get more post-spoiler into reasons about why. But yeah, it's very much, you're in the muck and the mire with these characters. The cast is doing an amazing job at realizing these people. They are going hard. They are really, in the muck and mire, but it's not necessarily a fun time to spend with them, just like it's not really a fun time to spend time with a lot of Judith Thompson's characters. And you spend a lot of this play kind of wondering, where is this even going? Is this going anywhere? What is going to become of these people? Do I want anything good to become of them? Is escape even possible? Do they deserve to escape? And do they even realize that's something that they should want? And it's really just, as you're watching it and stirring with all of these questions, you're just like, okay, like it is. I'm not usually one to comment that like, ooh, this play is too long, or long plays are a bad thing. I'm usually of the mindset that if I'm enjoying a play, I don't care how long it is. Have suitable intermission so we can stand up, go to the washroom, scratch our bums. But I know a lot of people and critics who do complain that, oh, these plays are always too long, or this one, more than any play I've seen in a long time, I really felt the length of it. I wasn't bored. I will stress that, but I did feel like, okay, there's more. And I've read the script, I will also add, for this play. I read it a while back, so I knew what was going to happen. And I still...
And Ryan did not spoil it for me. I will say Ryan was a very good friend. He did not spoil the play. He let me twist in my seat.
Yes, but even knowing where it was going, there were still probably 5 points during this play where I'm like, it could end right here. Or, oh, right, it's still going.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but it does kind of test your patience and tolerance for these characters. Because like Mac, you just said, if you don't feel like you relate to the characters and you don't necessarily like them and want to keep spending time with them, it is really kind of demanding a lot of you to just keep spending time with them. And I'm not saying that the likability of them is necessary. I think a lot of great plays have unlikable characters, and I think something that this play does well in both the writing, the directing, and the performance, all three, both of those, is that it, you understand why these people are the way they are. It's an unflinching, sympathetic look at why people end up this way. But it makes me kind of glad I don't live in a town like this, that I didn't come from a town like this, that I thankfully live in a city. And, we'll talk more about that small town element as being foundational to this piece. But yeah, I would recommend this piece with like heavy asterisks, not just in terms of the content warnings, although that is a big part of it, but just also, I could very easily understand why people would connect with this, but I can just as easily, more so from my own experience, understand why people might have a hard time finding this a piece that they really want to spend 2.5 hours or almost 2.5 hours with. Yeah, that's what I will say on the subject of non-spoiler. But yeah, the performances were all very good. It's a very well-designed show. Indie theater is, kind of, I won't say a dying art in the city, but we are running out of venues like Assembly that really do this kind of work. Like we used to have storefront theater that's no longer around. There used to be Video Fag, which is no longer around. We kind of have Red Sandcastle, which doesn't produce, stuff like this when they produce their own work. It's always like the Eldritch Theater as their resident company, and then whatever rentals they have. I admire the hell out of Cass and the Assembly team for putting on this show, but I don't know how I feel about this show in particular. And maybe that's all I'll say before we get into spoilers. Any last thoughts before we do?
I got no last thoughts because I'm ready to talk some spoilers.
Sure.
So what do you say we throw out some spoiler beer can?
Yeah, we'll crack a can, we'll crush it in our hand, we'll throw it.
Yes, there may be an assortment of beer cans now along the bottom of the page here. We will see how I ultimately lay it all out. But yes, there may be some spoiler beer
All right, spoilers. If you want to see Bone Cage without being spoiled, stop watching right now. It's running at the Assembly Theater until May 20th.
That's right.
Spoilers from here on out.
That's right. Let's do it. Okay. So what do you say we get into cast first? Because we did have praise for them that they did a very good job with this script. It just may be the script itself that makes it a bit of a challenge to really latch on to. But Ryan, who is your, let's say, top 2 cast show? This is a big cast.
Let's go back and forth. I'll do one, you do one, then I'll do one, you do one. Just so we can kind of not each other's, or I think there's enough like interesting people in this cast that we could say a lot of nice things about a lot of them. But I think my number one shout out I have to give to is our Jamie, and that is Daniel Reel. He is very much the center of a lot of attention. This is a big ensemble cast, 7 actors, I believe, and it's hard to kind of single out any of them as something like a protagonist, but
he's definitely not a protagonist.
Well, he's not a hero, but he could be. He's something that we could say is like protagonistic, because a lot of the plot does pivot around him. That it is like his family, or like some of the main characters, we could say. It's his wedding that we're building up to.
Yes, it's his sister Chicky, his dad Clarence, his fiance Krista, his best man and soon-to-be brother-in-law Kevin.
Yeah. So a lot of the plot does center around him. I'd say he's not quite the protagonist because it's an ensemble cast and none of them are the protagonist. Yeah. But just to clarify that distinction between protagonist doesn't mean good guy or hero in this case. Because he's quite unlikable, the character. And as you pointed out, that is a testament to Daniel's performance, because he really... he was quite manic. He's kind of always felt like he was in charge, but he also had the vulnerability. And, so much of this show is hanging on, do we understand, not necessarily but understand who Jamie is as a person and why he is. And I think one of what I thought was one of the most heartbreaking scenes is a scene where it's just him alone on stage on the phone calling the helicopter pilot training program, because he wants to get out of the forestry industry, and he sees which I believe was still in the forestry industry, but he wants to get out of being on chainsaw in the processor to fly a helicopter. And just him, his pride being bruised as he's trying to explain to them that he didn't finish high school, and that he, he was in, let's call it remedial math. It's not the term he uses, but him being in the remedial math program is now limiting his job prospects.
Didn't even finish remedial math. That's the reason why he drops out of high school.
Yeah, exactly. Which I can't imagine that he would have stayed in it if he was in more challenging math, but that's a different story. But so
that could have been a contender, Dad.
Well, yes. But it's just a heartbreaking scene of him realizing that the thing that I thought was my escape is even more unattainable than all the other alternatives. The fact that it's like $40,000 just to undertake the training, something that he doesn't have. He wants to do this so he can make money, so of course he doesn't have it. And yeah, it's just seeing his face drop and his posture, and then the outburst he has after. It was just so gripping. And I think if I were to give only one cast shout out, the whole cast was great, but if I give only one, it has to be for him.
Yes.
How about you?
Well, I mean, like, I'll just piggyback, but I'll see who my number one is. But definitely, Jamie is up there. And I mean, once again, it takes a really good performance to make me go, please die already.
We are past the spoilers. The spoilers. We will talk more about what happens at the end later. But yes, that's interesting you say that.
Yes. And I mean, this is where I go, the difference between the Amadeus, kill this character, versus Jamie as a character who I watched today, because the Amadeus that we saw was just blatantly annoying to the point where I'm like, can we get rid of him already? I don't have any love or connection to him. But with Jamie, it was different, because I did not like this character after his first monologue. After his first monologue, and you saw the true person he was, not the internal person that is broken, but the way he's acting out his brokenness. As much as I hated him, because I definitely would never want to be friends with this person in real life. Not the actor, the character Jamie.
I'm sure the actor's fine. I don't know him, but I do think it takes a certain, it takes somebody who probably is a much better person to kind of, I don't think anyone in the cast would want to work with him if he was like his character himself, I imagine.
Exactly.
But yes.
Exactly. So I mean, like, that was where, as you said, you understand where his pain is coming from. He has real trauma in his life. He's lost his brother. His dad's neglectful to him. He flunked out of high school. He's trying to get this other job, but he can't. Like, you can see where this spiral and where this acting out is coming from, where this pain is growing from. And so because of that, I'm like, okay, as much as I don't like you, I understand your trauma, and I wish somebody would just send you to rehab and to a good therapist so we could hopefully try and get some of this fixed in you, or let's give you better coping mechanisms, because drinking your life away does not work. So that's where I'll say with that is just, this is where I found the difference between him and Amadeus, was that him I wanted to die, but for a different reason. The Amadeus role,
how many times are we going to keep we fans of the show, we mentioned this on our editorial a little while ago, but we have another episode about Amadeus coming out now. So if you're wondering why do they keep mentioning Amadeus again, it's fresh in our minds, but gosh, we gotta stop talking about that show. Continue. Who is your number one?
Ryan, it was just so good, we have to keep coming back to it. It was one of our pinnacle debates. We could do a whole highlight reel of just pinnacle debates.
Not in a Bone Cage review. Who was your number one shout out?
Right. Sorry, yes, my number one shout out though goes to Jimmy Schlang as Clarence. Because, once again, he is the character that's probably the least redeemable because of the things he does. But he also brought some beautiful humanity to a role of a grieving father who just, once again, like his son, can't get out of his way and therefore continues to spiral to the point where I don't know if he was going to try and cut the eggs out of Chicky or something else that he was
It's
doing.
Unclear what was going on in his head in that moment, but when she's sleeping on the chair and he slowly approaches her with a knife and touches her womb region, he insists that he was just holding the knife because he was eating the apple, but do we believe him? I don't know.
Definitely some very questionable actions the character makes, but he brought the humanity to the role where I felt the sadness of his character. I felt the pain of his character of a broken man. He's lost his wife. He's on disability. Did they ever say why he was on disability?
They did not, but do we need to know? He's just clearly unable to work. He's
he's on disability. He's lost his son, and in his big monologue where he's like, if I can clone my son and bring him back, and the brain tumor's going to be there, I can prevent it this time. And I'm pretty sure every parent who has lost a child to a slow death, not like the child gets hit by a car and that is tragic, but a death that could have been preventable if you had known about it well enough ahead of time before it became an inoperable terminal diagnosis. I'm sure there are many parents in the world. I am not a parent yet, but I'm sure there are many parents in the world who do feel that pain and that guilt of, had I been a better parent, had I been a better judgment, being able to judge the situation and catch something sooner, something could have been different and we could have had a different outcome. And that constant nagging and that constant ache is something that really you felt in his performance. He was someone who I very much sympathized with, even if all his actions were, I was like, seriously, like they are scamming you. The whole freeze the body, or clone the body, or even like get a sketch. Which the actor actually did post on his Instagram. There actually is a proper close-up of the sketch of Travis.
Okay, we don't know what Travis looked like because we never meet him in this show, so it's funny, like, we have no frame of reference of, the artist did a good job. We don't know what
we don't know what he did, but it's the whole thing of, when you actually look at the drawing, it doesn't look like, it looks only like a pen sketch. It's not even like a proper, like, artist, like, shaded.
He blew a lot of money for something very simple.
Yes. Yes, exactly. But once again, the tragedy of that, of kind of the parent who sits and looks at the bedroom, and goes and wonders what happened. I mean, it's a very human thing, and it's a very tragic thing. So for me, I just go, Jimmy, you did such a good job not making this. As much as he does horrible things, I would say, I hate to say it, but he's kind of almost, I don't know if likable is the right word, but maybe the most sympathetic of all the characters. Is the way I'll put it.
Yeah, I think
because out of all the characters, I sympathize with him the most.
Yeah,
for being a grieving father.
There is good reason to sympathize with him. There's some things that the play leaves open to interpretation of.
Yes.
Shortly after Travis died, did he sexually assault Chicky or try to? Because there's an indication that
he did.
That he crawled into her bed and she got away, but he insists that he just wanted to be close to one of his kids because he missed Travis. But we don't know what he's trying to do.
Yes, once again, but he plays that ambiguity very well.
Yeah, like that moment in particular, if anybody saw Fall on Your Knees that can't stage or has read the Anne Marie McDonald novel that it's adapted from, like there's a lot of, and that's also set it's in Cape Breton, but kind of close to here geographically in small town kind of culture. That, it's hard to, in proximity at least, watch this scene in this play and not think of a similar scene in that play, which is also shortly after one child dies, the father does unspeakable things to, one of his other children. And, it's not necessarily fair to judge this character by the actions of a character in a completely different play, but it's there if you want it. And I think the play does a good job of balancing that, and Jimmy's performance, does a good job of, I believe he, the actor, has convinced himself, the character, that he did nothing wrong, but we don't know what actually went down there.
We do not. But so I definitely say Jimmy did a very good job with this role. He made me sympathize with his character the most out of all the cast, who are very hard to sympathize with for what they're doing. He was the one that I sympathized with the most. So bravo to him for that. All right, who's your number 2?
All right, it's tough because everyone is so good, but I think I want to give it to Karen Skora as Lissa, who isn't okay. So she's not in it much. She's only in 2 or 3 key scenes.
She's in 3 scenes. Yes.
She is. I don't know how old Karen, the actor, is, but the character is 14 years old.
Yes.
And regardless of how old Karen is, I believe that this character is 14. The youth that was being which makes her first scene in which Kevin becomes very close to assaulting her. It makes it very uncomfortable. And again, me having read the script, knowing how that scene ends, that it kind of stops before it goes past a point of no return. I was still on the edge of like this is just crawling underneath my skin watching this, and it was just awful. And I say the scene was awful, which is just that Karen's performance really sold it so well that I believe that she fit very well within the texture of this town. We kind of see this character as a parallel to Chicky, who also fell under the seductive influence of an older man when she was only 14. So, and that's, Chicky taking measures to see to it that Lissa doesn't make the same mistakes and fall into the same cycle as her, the youth and optimism that we see in Lissa, who, as far as she's concerned, is just, I have a crush on this guy, and I'm, there's nothing wrong about this. You kiss someone when they have an injury. That's what my mom does. Sex is very loud, which it's unclear where
that's one of the great comedy moments is everybody's got these individual spotlight in her internal monologue moments, and then somehow she says the line as they're transitioning back from the internal monologue, and everybody catches that one line. It's perfect.
Yeah. So I thought, even though I think of all the characters, she's the one with the least amount of stage time, she really made great use of that stage time and just added something very interesting. The kind of one of the most interesting things about this character is because, as I mentioned earlier, there's so many characters who we hear about but never see. It takes a long time for Lissa to show up that you could easily assume that she's just gonna be one of those characters who we hear about but never see. And then she shows up, and then it's like, oh, who else have we heard about who might just kind of waltz onto the stage?
I was waiting for Merv to show up at some point.
Merv or Reg or Carol. Like, there's so many characters in this that you expect to see and then never do. So I think dramaturgically, it's very creative or interesting to have withheld Lissa and then have her come on and be as prominent as she is. And then, after everything we have heard about her, I think Karen did a great job of creating the character that we probably already had in our heads.
Yes. And I will say, they definitely costumed her in brighter colors, and she felt like a brightness in this world of dark, heavy tragedy. But she was somewhat
destroyed by this town, but is gonna be.
Yes, exactly. Like, she wasn't destroyed by the town. She had this youthful optimism, this youthful gullibility of the world that is all the more tragic when you realize that something's probably going to happen to her in this town. In one way or another, there's going to be somebody who's not like Kevin, who has far less scruples and is going to take things too far because of her gullible innocence. But no, she was wonderful. She was just wonderful. She definitely owned every scene she was in. Like the fact she slides into the wedding photo.
Which is just like in the middle of somebody else's monologue, and then
Shiki's monologue that she kind of sends her away from the tables.
And then they unfreeze from the monologue, and she's just there in the wedding photos. So like, what are you doing? She, there's kind of very sparing comedy in this play. That's just like drudge and dreary. So even though her character is very much embroiled in that dreariness, she is this kind of like spark of comedy. And exactly optimism.
She treats it as optimistic. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. My number 2 shout out, or at least because once again, it's hard to pick for everybody. They all were so wonderful.
We'd be here for very long if we shouted out all of them, but just know that we think you're all great.
Yes. Jessie Elgood as Krista.
Yeah. Right.
Yes. Once again, playing someone younger than the actresses, because she's supposed to be like a grade 12, I think is where she's at.
She's graduating high school and wants to show up at graduation with a wedding
class.
She wants to show up at graduation with a wedding ring. That's part of her motivation here.
Yes. And so once again, playing that youthful energy in that thing, in that joy of someone who is just love blind. Like we all are in high school. We all think the boy we love, or the boy or girl we love in high school, is going to be the one that, is the one we're going to marry and happy doodle dandy all the way home. It's not that way in life, but it's one of those things where she is envisioning it that way. She is making how she's buying the washing machine that falls off the truck. But it's one of those things where it's just right from the get-go, you see once again, geez, almost like Lissa in a way, where it's like that blind optimistic love where she just can't see the faults of Jamie, even though we all in the audience are going, he is bad news. He is not going to treat you well. He is. But also at the same time, there was something a little, I don't know what the word, hinky about their relationship. Because kinky, maybe,
like
I don't know.
Licking the knife right before they have sex.
Yeah, like I was like, what is going on in this relationship? Maybe there is something more to these two they connect with on some weird kinky level. Not that kinks and fetishes are weird. They have a place. People who practice them safely and responsibly. Good for you. We full on support you practicing your particular kinks respectively, as long as they are legal. But definitely the one playing with the knife that never came back again. I was like, were we ever going to get more explanation as to why they do what they do? It was just kind of weird in that way. Once again, it showed that why Jamie and Krista maybe are pulled together in this weird world, that they are seeing something in each other that people aren't other people aren't catching. So maybe there is something there in the words of Beauty and the Beast. There's something there
that wasn't there before. Yeah.
Something a little, but for them, sometimes in the world, you do find that one person who can see you through your faults and see you for the beauty of the internalness that you are. Who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something there. But even then, she did a really good job of, as much as she was love blind, you understood her love blindedness. Just like you understood Clarence's pain that was driving him, you understand the love and the vision that Krista has that is driving her. As much as you disagree with it on a personal level, you understand that character enough that you go, okay, we've all been there. We've all been the lovesick puppy in high school that just can't see the bad person through the weeds, but it's like, you got to go through that in life. I mean, I don't think she ever envisioned herself being a widower. A widow
on her wedding night.
On her wedding night.
Yeah.
But, it definitely has, what else her character reminded me of? She reminded me a lot of Julie Jordan from Carousel, the unfortunate love partner of Billy Bigelow.
Yeah.
Who unfortunately cannot see the man that Billy Bigelow is, and unfortunately lives through her wedding night and ends up in not a great situation. Once again, very complex character, Julie Jordan. Very fascinating read of Carousel there. There's definitely some deeper readings you can do of that play. If you want, go check out my podcast review of that with Autumn Smith. Anyway, that being said, Krista's character, fascinating in her dynamic with Chicky, that older sister, younger sister routine, very well done. Her and Caitlin Race had very good chemistry with each other. Mm-hmm. They definitely felt like longtime sisterly friends to each other, that you understand, once again, the dynamics that go on in this group very well. So I definitely give a shout out to Jessie L. Good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed.
Brian?
Yeah, I think she did a good job. I think part of this, I think does fit into the casting as well of Jessie in this role, is that something about her and Jamie just look mismatched together. Even aside from the character dynamic being very mismatched, they have this one, as you pointed out, this kinky moment that seems to show maybe there's something deeper, but they really don't seem to have a lot in common. They don't get along very well. Jamie frequently says that she's the only person who knows me, who she can say my name. Everyone else calls me Fluffy because that's what Chicky calls me. But fuzzy, not Fluffy. Yeah, which is it's funny because there's the line about how he had peach fuzz hair when he was a baby, and that's that's the origin of that fuzzy nickname. But yes, but you are the one person, me. Don't call me Fuzzy. But they really don't seem to be on the same page about anything. She really wants this to be a perfect wedding, and he doesn't give a hoot about any of that. And, she envisions a certain version of their married life, and he has no intention of living that out. And I think there's, tragicness in the optimism that Jessie put in this performance. But I also feel there maybe could have been more layers of awareness. There's a lot of lines that Krista has where she's she says it in jest, but the second we get married, I'm divorcing you. Or there's and she has little bursts and moments of whenever somebody asks why are you marrying, or sorry, do you love, you're marrying him, but do you love him? And she's well, I'm marrying him.
Do you love me?
But her answer isn't yes, I love him. It's I'm marrying him, aren't I? That's not the same thing as you love him. And she says it multiple times in the show. And she has a vision of her life, a vision that being in this town, she can't envision anything better for herself. And when she gets her freeze frame monologue in the photography sequence, her whole thing is, I always hated having a new coat because then people would for a moment not know who I was. But now that I'm marrying Jamie, everyone will know who I am. It seems you just want his reputation in the town more than you want him. You want to be associated with that reputation that he has more so than because you love him as a person. And I think those layers are there, but maybe a less optimistic portrayal of this character could have sussed those out a little more. I think Jessie did a very good job, but there's also layers that I felt could have been missing in this character. I don't know if that makes sense.
That does. Mm-hmm. That absolutely does.
But like then her final moment right after he jumps and like her tears are just like, oh, whew, that was a big,
very, very. She hit the emotional button right there.
Yeah,
as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. So something else I want to say about the cast. Sorry, not to belabor this a little more, but so Cass Van Wyck was on the Stageworthy podcast earlier this week promoting the show, and she talked about how this production came about. And something that maybe you and some of our listeners are aware of is that Assembly Theatre hosted indie general auditions late last year, where they got together a bunch of the indie companies to, all kind of pool their resources and have general auditions all together so that any indie company can be exposed to all this new pool of actors. And as Cass described this on Stageworthy, is that there's this whole generation of like now young actors, theater school grads who, kind of lost those early years to the pandemic, that you graduate from theater school, you do indie theater for a while, and then you start working your way up. But in that, several year dearth of theater that happened during the pandemic, a lot of people missed out. So Assembly spearheaded this under Cass's guidance, but brought together a lot of indie companies to just see this huge pool of actors who haven't had a chance to break in. And this production was kind of brought about as, okay, so we've just seen all these great actors. What do we do with them? Now what? And so Cass went looking for a show that could spotlight some of these actors. And, she was originally envisioning one that, she could act with them. But then when she found this play, it didn't have a role for her, but it did have a lot of young characters. And that's exactly what she wanted to spotlight. And that's how she decided to make this her directorial debut.
Brilliant.
So I do say, just like, as we've shouted out the cast, I want to say that there's something very noble and very important about, even if I don't know if I love this show, I think it's doing a great service of giving these actors their shot, and Assembly Theatre is doing great work at allowing young artists, and not just the cast, because also a lot of the crew, who we'll talk more about in a minute, were also young up-and-comers who are who without venues like Assembly wouldn't have an opportunity to break in, at least in this kind of space.
Yes, agreed. Well
just
said,
wanted to
Ryan.
mention
Well
that
said.
before we got away from.
No, it's brilliant. I did not know about this general audition that was organized by Cass, and bravo. That should be done every year.
Yes,
going forward, that should be like an annual thing that goes on, because that definitely needs to happen across the country. There should be, every province should have like an indie theater hosted, if there's a big enough pool of that in each like metropolitan city, for sure, because definitely that's a great way to open doors and network, for sure.
We heart Assembly Theatre.
Absolutely.
All right, moving on.
All right, here we go. So, production team. Ryan, what is your favorite production or design element of the show?
Okay, I want to give it to the lighting design, actually, if I'm going to shout out just one. So Chin Apalpane was the lighting designer on this production. And it was subtle. Like they mentioned, among all of the content warnings, everything, they mentioned that there were flashing lights in this production, which, can be an epilepsy trigger for a lot of people. And I'm usually an advocate for, if you can do a show without flashing lights, you should do your show without flashing lights, just in general, because if you absolutely can't, if it's foundational to your show, I don't want to limit anyone's artistic expression. Please do a show with flashing lights if that's necessary. But if it's not necessary, I'm always of the mind that you are just limiting people with epilepsy's ability to watch and enjoy your show. So I feel like unless it's very, very necessary, it's not important. And I can't actually pinpoint the moment where these flashing lights did appear. I'm sure they were just probably, I think they were just covering their bases. Like there was no strobe effect that I was able to notice.
They could have had a strobe effect at the very end during the final jump.
Right.
That's the one spot on the show where I'm like, maybe it was going to be there. I don't know. I
think it was mostly just maybe some flickers during the scene transitions.
You know what it was? You know what it was? It was wedding photos.
Oh, yes, that makes sense. And that wasn't strobe effect. I think a lot of people, with various light sensitivity triggers probably would have been able to watch that just fine. I can't speak for everyone, of course, but why I do want to shout out the lighting design is mainly one key element that I thought was really interesting is that the play is bookended with a very sharp, round spotlight on Jamie in his opening monologue and then in his final monologue as he's jumping. And I think this is an interesting, or a play with an interesting relationship to realism, let's say. We talked about the the pause for monologue moments about how that doesn't feel like it belongs in this play. Not that the characters aren't interestingly plumbing the depths of their psychology in these moments, but everything else is kind of like groundedly realistic. And then we have this one sort of desire under the elms, Eugene O'Neill kind of pause for monologue, or and like maybe if this convention was weaved in more consistently, then we could see more of it.
But it kind of shows up once at the beginning of the show, then it's not throughout the rest of Act 1, and then it shows up twice in Act 2.
Well, yeah.
In the wedding photo sequence, and then at the jump at the end.
Yeah.
So 3 times we get these kind of side cut monologues.
But I love the way that the lighting emphasize these moments, these breaks from realism. The wedding photography as these big flash moments of flash, and now, everybody pauses and it's my turn to speak and I will say something. And then, Clarence has his about the foxes, and then Jamie's is about Clarence's memory of the foxes, kind of coloring the way that, and the lighting really
even Lissa gets one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Lissa's is very important in terms of kind of understanding what happens with her and Robbie and Kevin later. But it's the sharp spotlight in the opening and closing sequences, as I thought was very impactful, because as gritty and realistic as this play is, that's such an overtly theatrical gesture to be like, I am standing in a spotlight. It's not just that they're making sure I'm lit, is that I am in my spotlight in this moment. It's very round circle. Yeah. And I think that helps facilitate this this play for us, an audience that maybe doesn't live in these communities or isn't from these communities. And I see it as a deliberate gesture that kind of indicates, yes, this is a play, and these characters are going to monologue and present their lives to you in this kind of theatrical way, and the spotlight really does that. And the way that that final monologue is certainly written, I think, helps that and kind of explains the justification for that. So overall, I thought the lighting design was really strong, but that was something in particular that I thought deserved special mention.
Agreed. I will say for me, mine is the set.
Yeah, I was thinking about the set, but I figured you were going to say it, so I used my opportunity to talk about the lighting.
Good. Yeah, no, that set was really cool. I mean, once again, this is an indie theater space, so you're not going to have the Mervish National Theater budgets to have running water and everything else. You got to do the best you can with what you got. And so the fact that they were able to do so much work with that space, with like 4 stumps, they have that really cool table that pops out of the back porch that they have there, the armchair that's also a stump that swivels and moves. Very well done, once again. This is a big play in the sense of it covers a lot of ground, a lot of different areas.
Indoor and outdoor spaces.
Indoor, outdoor
which was
space.
Just facilitated on this kind of outdoor looking space. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So they definitely captured the rural logging town. Because even the wallpaper was like the tree stumps.
Yeah, like this kind of image in the graphic design that those watching on YouTube can see behind Mac. Like those tree rings were kind of on wallpaper, which similarly theatrical creates this non-realistic effect, but surrounds them with the trees. And this, it also kind of evokes this cage imagery of the poem from which the title is derived.
Yes.
They're surrounded by these circles of the trees are enclosing them. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, once again, it's very hard to do a big play like this where like you have characters jumping off bridges and things like that, where it's like, how do you stage that in a small indie basement theater space? And they did a really good job of that. Like, was it perfect all the time? Were we always able to figure out where they were geographically from each other? Not always, but that's okay. We were able to kind of piece it together and we're able to make it work. But I think indie theater needs more appreciation for that. You don't always have to be Mervish with a barricade or a falling chandelier. You can do a lot with a lot less. And they did a very good job of that. And I also will say the rubber rock.
I was just going to say, I'm surprised you're not
on the ground. Because that did, when I did walk on it to go to the backstage bathroom in the theater space, I walked in and had to do a bit of a, wait a minute, what is this?
Yeah, like, because for those who haven't seen it, or somehow still watching past the spoiler, there's this kind of like textured mulch covering the entire surface of the floor that looks like wood chips, I suppose, or maybe even soil.
Dirt, or like topsoil.
Topsoil, but then you step on it and it's like foamy rubber. I'm not sure what exactly it's made of. It's
like rubber rock material that gets used,
it creates a very potent visual effect that throws you for a loop when you then do step on it, which is fun.
Yes. So that is my shout out for the production, is the wonderful set design by J.B. Nells.
Nice. Great job, J.B. Nells.
Good job to them. All right, Ryan. So let's talk about something that we've kind of alluded to,
Mm-hmm.
which is the likability of these characters and how does that affect your viewing of the piece? Because there are times when you watch a show where you have characters that are just so hard and unlikable that it's very hard to even connect with the play at all, and you kind of end up just kind of, I don't want to say hate watching it, but you're kind of just suffer through watching it.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, the fact that I was ready for Jamie to die at some point, whether that was via the knife that was set up, or I mean, they kept talking about the watering hole jumping thing, but I didn't know if they were going to go that route and have him do a Javert fall off the bridge. Sans like Russell Crowe sound effect that really could have been there. That sound. But yeah,
So
no, like it's just for me, like I just do. It's tough where it's like I really like this is where the language of the play really got under my skin. The way they referred to people with neurodivergent disabilities, as well as the way they referred to the LGBTQ members of the community, and that just got under my skin in so many ways. Where I was just hating
yeah.
Jamie, and also Kevin, because Kevin
Well,
gets into it too.
it's kind of all of them,
Yeah.
and that's like I know we maybe single them out because they're the most bombastic and overt about it, but nobody corrects them. Nobody takes them to task. This is just the culture that they are surrounded in.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. So for me, I just go. That really did push my buttons a lot because I just go. And I think it's also more in the writing of the play where it's like, do we need to have him repeatedly call Robbie the R word or call the one teacher the F word? You know, it's like you can say it once and make your point. Did it have to be said repeatedly to the point where I was really starting to hate, like vehemently in my stomach, hate what was being said? I don't know, Ryan. Like, what are your thoughts on this? As a dramaturg yourself, where is the line?
Well, I don't think that there needs to be a hard line on these things of no play should ever do that, because I understand.
No, I think every play should. I think if the play calls for it, do it. But you know,
yeah. Well, and that's
got to be a line somewhere.
This play is dramaturgically very clearly about this. I don't think the writer approves of any of this, but I don't know. I'm struggling to kind of put these thoughts into words, but and this maybe comes into contact with the next thing that I want to talk about, so maybe we'll blend these two topics together. This was a play about a small town. The town is the protagonist, if you want to be artsy and pretentious about it, more so than any individual character is. And it's really about how these towns are set up, that nobody can ever leave, and that that you need to, this is something that Cass also talked about on Stageworthy too, is that because she herself grew up in a small town similar to this one, as she said on that show. And, you know, there's a very stark difference between the people who leave and the people who don't in terms of just their mindset. And, you know, you see the things that your old high school friends post on social media and like, oh, I'm very glad that I got out of this town because maybe that could have been me if I didn't. And I think this play is interesting in how unflinchingly and uncritically, I'm not saying that necessarily in a negative connotation, but how it just presents these characters as they are, as people in these towns supposedly would be, without casting judgment on them for that, because it's a recognition that this comes from ignorance. And this was also something talked about on that episode of Stageworthy, but like ignorance not as like a bad thing, like you are stupid because you're ignorant, but ignorant because you have never been exposed to anything that would teach you otherwise. How could you possibly know better?
Right.
And I think part of me wonders, though, and this is a problem that I also have with Heroes of the Fourth Turning, which is, you know, we'll see if we do wind up reviewing that at Crows next year, because that's a play that I've read and don't know how I feel about similarly to this one.
Maybe that'll be Jill and I that'll go ahead and see that one.
Well, maybe. But it's these plays that kind of do create these uncritical views of these towns. I wonder who they're for, is my question. Because are they for city folk like us who can condescendingly look at it and be like, oh, I'm so glad that's not me?
Yeah.
Or are they for the people in these communities to look at themselves and feel themselves accurately reflected on stage?
Right.
And if it is the latter, there's something noble about that, but at the same time, if the playwright herself, or himself in the case of Heroes, recognizes that this is bad and maybe you should try to escape and or shake yourself out of this, how helpful is that unflinching portrait? And is it, and like, you know, clearly this is a negative circumstance that is very effectively dramatized, but like, I wonder, like, after I read Heroes of the Fourth Turning, I turned to Jill and I said, like, I wonder what, because it's that, for those who are unfamiliar, that's a play about, you know, the, you know, small town conservative Christian university in the States environment, and, you know, it's in the aftermath of the Charlottesville riot. And I said to Jill that I wonder what, it's one thing if, like, I wonder what the kind of communities that's being represented would actually think about this play, but not if a group of touring actors from New York brought it to them. But what if a community theater director in one of these towns picked up the script, said, "This looks like us," and put it on? Would they get the biting irony of the story? Or would they just think, yep, that's exactly how I feel about everything.
Right.
And I kind of feel the same way about this. Now, I think this one has a lot more tragic pathos in a way that could, you know, maybe, and not every play has to, you know, have a utilitarian function of shaking people out of their complacency and these cycles of poverty. But like, and, you know, it's, and that's certainly not to blame the people who find themselves in these cycles. That's what I think the play dramatizes so well. But I just wonder who it's for. And I acknowledge that I don't think it's for me. And I hope it's not for me because, you know, not growing up in an environment like this, not currently living one, I don't feel good being condescending towards people like the characters in this play. That doesn't make me, you know, like, I think a lot of people probably do, you know, city folk like me, look at a play like this and be like, ah, yes, the rural communities, and thankfully that's not me, and how sad it is for them. Like, there is like a kind of self-congratulatory kind of posture you could take towards this. But I don't, the likability of the characters, which is how we started this conversation, I want them to wake up. I feel sad for the fact that they can't, but I also feel mixed about the fact that I am compelled to ascribe my own moral strictures on them when I know that it's not their fault that they are lacking those moral strictures. I don't know. This is not a coherent answer to the question as posed at all, but this is where my mind's at. And that's why I think I'm struggling to have a very as positive reaction. Yeah, as positive a reaction to the play as I maybe would have liked going in. Well, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Like you, just a pause. You grew up in Barrie or around Barrie,
I did.
Right? Is that considered a small town, or does it kind of medium? What do you feel like you can relate to the characters based on your own upbringing and surroundings?
Part of me can.
Okay.
Because I was born in Barrie, and then around age 10 or 11, we moved out to the countryside in Oro, which is between Aurelia, the next big city, and Barrie. It's the farm country. So, you know, and then I went to high school where it's the east end of the city. So, you know, it's a mix of the older homes of like older Barrie mixed with some of the country folk who are coming into town. So definitely a lot of flannel wearing. Definitely everybody wanted to go out to the Oro Fair every year. You know, there definitely is some small town vibes that I have understood. I think, though, we also have a very vibrant, very well done social system in the city, where we have 2 big regional professional theater companies in the city. We have a very active pride community in the city. So, you know, it's one of those things of, I wouldn't call us like, but mind you, that's Barrie. In Oro, we don't have a pride parade, but it's because it's so small that you come to Barrie.
Yeah,
you wouldn't do one out on the 7th line of Oro in the middle of nowhere. You know, but we also have Boots and Hearts that show up every year. To there. There's always the locals who go to that. And you know, it's one of those things of, I definitely could relate to some of the aspects. There's definitely something within this play that I can go, yeah, there is a little bit of that there. I don't know if it's as extreme as this play puts it, but there definitely is some innateness. I mean, even my dad, for example, my dad compared to my mom, he grew up in the small town of Newton Robinson, which is right between Cookstown and Bradford, small farming community. And my mom was it's kind of what we could now call almost like an army brat. My grandfather was not in the army at that time, but he worked for a large global company. So she was born in Quebec, then moved to Holland for a number of years, then moved to England for a number of years, then moved to the States for a number of years in upstate New York, and then finally moved to Barrie.
Yeah, so cosmopolitan, very worldly, not insular like these kinds of towns are.
Exactly. Yeah. So but you can definitely see some of the different viewpoints my dad and mom have. Mm-hmm. My dad, even though he is very liberal-minded and has definitely is very open and very welcoming, and he's definitely not the small town sensibility like these people, there are still moments where his smaller town sensibilities can slip into things where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I can still see you grew up in the smaller town. There is definitely a little bit of something there that even my mom will catch sometimes going, Kevin, you sound a bit like Newton Robinson there, so it's one of those things. There definitely is a little bit of things I can relate to, but not as extreme as this play. I think in this playwright, sorry?
Catherine Banks.
Catherine Banks, thank you.
Yeah.
I think she took the small town vibeness to the extreme, and in doing so, really ratcheted up some of the more unlikable aspects of these characters to really amplify that. And which, I think, to me, put me off edge a lot of the time. Like, that's where there were really strong moments where I did not like these characters to the point where I was like, I do not know how I'm going to continue connecting with this play. And as you said, coming out with a overall positive experience. Once again, the production was lovely and the cast was very good, and Cass did a very good job along with the production team of creating this play. But the play itself and the subject matter and the way they go about things really does push my buttons sometimes on how far can I go before I really do not like these characters. Like even August Osage County, there are some very unlikable characters in that play, but there also are some characters that I don't mind as much, who I can kind of have a good chuckle at, or things like that. It's kind of like watching Succession, where the characters in that show can be extremely horrible, unlikable people. Go watch the pilot episode where they play that ball game with that rural family, and they trick the young child out of like over $1,000 if he can hit a home run, knowing he full well can't. It's one of those things of, you don't like who these people are, but there's kind of this delicious joy of watching these Machiavellian characters go about their evil business dealings. Here it's just so small town. It's like, I don't know if I like anything you guys are doing in this story, Yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense, Ryan.
No, it does make sense. I think just the one thing I would add to that is you said that Catherine Banks amplified that small town. Like, I think there are towns that are like this, yes. I would assume, having not come from one. But I would say, even though your upbringing, you say you were on the cusp of one like this, the fact that it wasn't quite all the way doesn't mean that therefore this fabrication that or an amplification of like your exposure in like a medium town kind of isn't necessary.
Well, I mean, there are what's called sundown towns that still exist, which are very. If you are not white and Christian, do not go into those towns. They will get you out of that town one way or another way.
Anyway, we don't need to belabor this point, but I think if we're struggling to find these characters likable, I think it comes from a very, a difference in experience that makes us difficult to relate to them, even if we can see the play trying very hard to make us relate to them, or at least find them sympathetic, which ultimately we do, but you kind of wonder if I understand you, but still would not want to spend time with you. I just wonder, again, who's it for is what I keep coming back to. If it's not for me, that's fine, but is it actually for the people of these towns, and what do they get out of it? Cass said herself that she does come from a town like this, and clearly directing the show, she finds something relatable in it. But she's one of the lucky ones who got out, so you kind of have to wonder, what would it mean for somebody who didn't to see a play like this?
Yes. All right, well, let's get into the final topic, which is the infamous ending, the big Javert on the bridge scene.
Yeah. So funny thing before we get into this, after the show, I was chatting with fellow reviewer Liam Donovan, and he said, like, oh, that ending was neat. It kind of had some Ibsen vibes to it. And it's funny because Ibsen was not something that was in my mind while watching this show.
Right.
But I, hearing him say this, I'm like, oh, maybe like Master Builder, because, spoiler alert for Ibsen plays that nobody but me cares about, but like the more obscure Ibsen back catalog, but like Master Builder, because like it has a fall from a great height and, callous disregard for pedophilia. Is that what he's going on? He's like, oh, I actually haven't read that one. And then we kind of just changed topics but it occurred to me after, as I was on the subway home, is like, oh, he probably meant Rosmersholm. Because what he mentioned to me is, oh, does like Master Builder have like a death by drowning? And I was like, no, but it has the fall from the great height, and that's why my mind went there in response to his prompt. But like, oh, he's probably thinking of Rosmersholm, which is like an even more obscure Ibsen play that I thought nobody but me cared about. And I think, but yeah, like this idea of this kind of ethereal death by drowning in the river. It is an interesting ending, and why I bring up Liam's point about Ibsen is because it kind of does, even though it feels like a very small town way to die in this way, it does kind of come with this gravitas to it that we talked about Chekhov's knife as we were talking about during intermission about, this knife was dangled around so many times. You keep wondering, how's it going to be used? Who's going to get stabbed? And then nobody gets
Which would have
stabbed.
worked because, Billy Bigelow in Carousel, that's how he meets his end, is via the knife. And then same thing with Judd Fry. Judd Fry falls on his knife.
It works assuming you are doing the labor of comparing it to these musicals that you happen to call to mind, just like I'm now doing the labor of comparing it to Ibsen plays, which wasn't my thought originally, but, I blame you, Liam, if you're watching, for putting this bug in my brain. But yeah, but I do think the knife was very good as a red herring, but the real Chekhov's instrument is the hole in the creek that if you don't fall down exactly, it will break your spine. And they say that multiple times. In the very first scene,
Kevin's Kevin's very worried about being thrown off the bridge.
Yeah. And then, so, the knife does a good job of distracting us, but that's the thing we really should have been on the lookout for. And then, let's talk about the ending. So Jamie jumps and monologues while falling or upon impact.
I am reaching, but I fall.
So aside from comparing it to Javert, what are your thoughts about this particular sequence?
So once he got up on the bridge, that definitely tipped me off of, okay, because he throws the knife away. So I'm like, okay, so clearly there's not going to be a fight with Merv where he comes back in with like the knife in his gut or something and he's dying. It's like, okay, all right, so we're going with this route of Jamie going out. So once I knew the knife was no longer in play for the cause of death, and he got up on the bridge, I was like, oh, okay, it's gonna be the bad jump that's gonna get him, and he's gonna not make it. Even on the way down to his death, he doesn't give a happy monologue. He gives a monologue about being an abusive husband and an abusive father. And I'm like, okay, so we're not even supposed to sympathize with him even when he's about to die.
Well, if I can comment on that, I think, to me, that monologue isn't about like, well, I'm dying, but don't care about me. I feel like it's more about that because he's falling and dying, that it's kind of presenting that this is the best option for him. Not that he's doing it deliberately.
But it does end up being the best thing for him.
If he remained alive, if he, had a marriage and a family with Krista, it would be terrible. Of course it would be terrible. Everybody can see that except for Krista. That Mickey saw it coming a long mile away. And and he's, these are the cycles of poverty, of abuse, of trauma that these towns generate, is the fact that he, while falling or while dying, can envision the alternative. It really does it gives some sort of, I don't want to say hope because it's very hopeless, but it gives a sense that this is, I don't even know how to say this, but like he is breaking the cycle through this,
by breaking his back.
Well, by breaking his back, but this is what the destitute of these kinds of towns will lead someone to. You can either live the life that he describes in this monologue where everything is terrible, or you can try to escape, and without the economic possibilities to escape, this is all he has. and we'll talk about the ending sequence after the fall in a minute, but sorry, I interrupted you. Continue your thought. I just don't think it's about trying to make us like him in that last minute.
Right. Yes. But yeah, no, so he has this fall, and I mean, once again, the actor who played Jamie, Daniel, did a beautiful job of going through all the emotions in his face of realizing, oh crap, I missed the hole. This is it. Like, it also, once again, I don't know why I keep coming back to the Billy Bigelow, but I do. Like, there is the scene at the end of Carousel where Billy is trying to reconnect because he gets sent back. If you don't know the musical Carousel, Billy Bigelow, a carnival barker for the local carousel, falls in love with Julie Jordan. They get married. He then takes on a bad job of robbing people. He dies, then comes back, then gets sent back down one more time to try and make amends. Doesn't go well. He ends up abusing his daughter as well. But he does have this beautiful monologue at the end where he's watching on the graduation of his daughter, and he's talking to his wife, Julie, from beyond, kind of saying, even though I didn't know how to say it, I did love you. And so him doing the Krista say my name and I'll come back to you did evoke some of those Billy Bigelow-ish vibes. So for me, that was something that just always kept triggering in my brain of Billy Bigelow. Like, the tragedy of Billy Bigelow is, once again, he was very much like Jamie, small town, stuck in the cycle, can't seem to be like Enoch Snow and get out of his own way and take on the better job opportunity even when it's presented to him. So I just think, once again, it's a tragic death for a character that I don't particularly like, because I mean, for people who don't know, drowning is a very painful experience. Freshwater drowning is thankfully faster than saltwater drowning, so
because that makes a huge difference in this context.
So maybe he didn't have to suffer long as he's under the water, but just the horror of that, like, you can look up but you can't move to save yourself. They did some really good job painting that imagery of him looking up into the surface and not being able to move and get there.
Yeah, like also his spine broke.
Yes, exactly.
Which, like, even if he could swim back up to the surface, like, anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, so once again, it's a very tragic, very well done death scene. Once again, using what you can in an indie theater space to make it work. They did a very good job with that spotlight.
Yeah.
In that moment, working there. But yeah, like, was I sad Jamie died?
Well,
no.
Let's talk about the certainty of these statements we're making. Jamie died, because this play ends with an interesting final image. It's not just the monologue and him falling in the spotlight. We get, after he finishes his monologue and the spotlight ends and, like, he disappears from the stage, he's presumably under the surface.
Yeah.
Krista, we get her reaction, and she's like,
she does say his name.
Yeah, she does say his name. It's the last word of the script. I have the script in front of me on my phone here because I wanted to check something that I'll allude to in a second. But yeah, the very last spoken word in this play is her saying his name. And then there's this wordless sequence of Jamie coming from, like, behind the stage, like in the back wings.
Yes.
Not from the surface of the water where he fell, but he just, like, comes around. And granted, I've read this play before, remember, but it had been a while, and I had to just kind of remind myself, was this in the script? Because this wordless sequence very much could have been a directorial choice. It doesn't change a lick of text.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that would have been a pretty bold choice of Cass's if Jamie dies, but now here he is back on stage, to just, like, add that sequence. But it was not her invention. I have the script here. I'm going to read this final stage. I'm going to read this final stage direction after Krista says, like, her whole, I swear to God, you fucking fucker. Please, 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 Jamie. Stage directions read, quote, Jamie walks out to her. He picks up his shoes. He holds out his hand. Krista notices the knife on the beach. She picks it up and hands it to Jamie. As they walk over the bridge, Jamie is staring straight ahead and Krista is staring up at his face. The end.
Oh.
So that's, textually speaking, that is what that final image that we saw on stage, this wordless little sequence there.
So he is supposed to survive.
Well, Does he, though, is the question, because I would love, this is an interesting passage to close read, because it says Jamie walks out to her. It doesn't say Jamie emerges from the water.
Right.
And the way it was staged, he comes from like behind.
Yes.
His back is presumably shattered from the fall. So
he says as much.
Yeah, he says as much, and we've been hinted that this is the case if you fall wrong here. So he should not be able to walk. And it doesn't say that he emerges from the water, and at least in this staging, it was very deliberately not presented as such.
Yeah.
So is he alive? Or is this some kind of metaphysical, abstract sequence from beyond the dead? I don't know. I don't know if you have... But I think it is meant to be open to interpretation. It is preventing any kind of literal reading, any definitive reading, any authoritative, this is what happened, this didn't. But it's curious. I don't know. If
it is.
What are your thoughts now, having unpacked what the stage direction itself says?
Well, now knowing it's actually in the stage direction, I did ask you last night as we were walking down the street after the show, I did ask you, was that in the script? And you said, I don't know at the moment.
I had to remind myself now.
You had to go look it up, which thankfully you did. Thank you for that, because now we have a definitive thing that the playwright's even putting this on us. So I still think he dies.
Well, I do too, because... just the improbability of his being able to walk, the fact that in both the phrasing and the stage directions, it doesn't say, like, he emerges from the water, because that would, to me, that would seem definitively like, oh, thank God, you're alive, you didn't drown. To me, speaking of Ibsen, that would feel very much like the historical alternate ending of A Doll's House, where she decides not to leave because that's what the censors demanded. And it kind of feels like, oh, the ending is supposed to be that he died, but we wrote this one little stinker at the end that says, nah, he's fine. Just to satisfy, Victorian sensibilities, I suppose. But anyway, I think it's supposed to raise more questions than answers.
I think it's... I mean, the way I interpret it is Jamie dies, but the spirit of Jamie carries on in Krista, because he does reference the fact that she's pregnant, and they find out next week.
Well, that as he says,
we know they did hook up by the river at the beginning of the play. So to me, that reads as the seed of Jamie, the essence of Jamie, does carry on, even if he is now beneath the waves and is no more.
Well, and then there's the interesting part of that stage direction. She picks up the knife and hands it to Jamie.
Right.
Now, if that was reversed and his spirit picks up the knife and hands it to her,
right,
that might have, speaking of her pregnancy and, certain things that we could maybe infer after the final curtain, that could be, but she picks up the knife and hands it to him. This spirit, this essence. Who's to say? Catherine Banks.
Who's to say?
I don't trust the authority of authorial intent, but if you want to get in the comments and say what you were thinking, I'll gladly listen to it, even if I think it's, a little bunk to assume that therefore that's authoritative. I don't know. This play is strange. I will just come out and say it in those blunt terms. I find this play strange. I recognize I might not be the target audience for it. I've tried my best to approach this play with as much critical generosity and understanding and appreciation for the things that it did really well. But as a reviewer, as a dramaturg, as just a theater enthusiast, this play kind of baffles me. And I think it was a very good production of a very strange play, might be my final word on it.
Well said. And I will back that up as well. I mean, once again, this play is not an easy play. It's heavy. The characters are not overly likable. The ending's a bit vague. It definitely does throw a lot of tones that you gotta slow through to get to the bottom of the hill. If you want to stick with the metaphors of this play, it's a very tough jump to hit that black hole right on the money. And I think this production did a very good job of hitting the hole and working with what they had on the tighter budget they had, and still making a very compelling piece, a piece that left me thinking last night about a lot of things, from likability to the death scene to everything in between. It definitely gave me a lot of food for thought.
Agreed.
And I think that's what theater's supposed to do. And I think theater pieces are supposed to drive you out to the coffee shop or to the pub afterwards, so you can have a drink and have a chat,
as we do on this show.
As we do, so it's one of those things of that's and I think this is a mark of a good production, that it left you and I really stimulated. And I mean, we've been talking for almost 2 hours on this piece.
Oh my god!
Once again, Assembly Theater, you do it again. We did it with the Huns. Now we're doing it again with Bone Cage. Bravo to this team who just keep coming back with these pieces that stimulate Ryan and I's curiosities, our brains. So yes. Bravo.
Well done. Looking forward to the next one.
Excellent. Yes, well said. All right, Ryan, let's sign out for the day. So give us that classic Ryan Borochovitz enough we all know and love.
Yeah, I'm Ryan. If you like me, don't bother trying to follow me on social media. Just follow Cup of Hemlock instead. That all of my theatery opinions live there. It's at COH Theater on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It's Cup of Hemlock Theater on YouTube. The Cup of Hemlock Theater podcast on all the podcast platforms. Right. Like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, leave a review if you want, etc., etc. How about you?
Follow me at Mackenzie Horner on all social media platforms. If you want some more of my musical antics, I do have episodes on Carousel in Oklahoma. Not Les Mis yet. That is our 100th episode. We are saving the big Javert jump for episode 100 and 101. But if you do want to hear our thoughts on those two musicals that feature similar dynamics, you can definitely check out those episodes. Ryan's coming on for a review mini-series. We just finished our second season review mini-series of Schmigadoon as well. So there's lots of good content there for you to like and explore too. And yeah, the Bone Cage runs till May the 20th at Assembly Theater. We highly recommend. Go check it out, but just check yourself at the door. Make sure you are mentally ready to go into some very darker, heavier places than maybe you're expecting. But there you go. All right, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you all in the next episode. If you have a show you want us to come and talk about, or if your cast wants to come talk to us, please reach out to us. The link to reach us is in the video description, and we cannot wait to hear from you. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye. Cheers.
Cheers. When you